Dane, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Polly. Thank you for keeping the eyes to the sky and what the climate engineers are doing, manipulating. Nothing is left untouched. In regard to cyclonic rotations, the U.S. military has been engaged in manipulating these storms since 1947, since Project Sirius. How far has that technology come since? And even that far back, with very minimal effort, they were able to affect the behavior of a cyclone. So again, with current technology and the size of the current fleet of climate engineering, and that's very different from, quote, weather modification, two very different animals. It's important to keep that in mind. So none of these storms are left untouched, and they can make or break them at will. This technology is patented, so we could end up with a extreme last moment intensification. Rapid intensification is a term we hear all the time now, because they are manipulating these storms, and they allow them to strengthen at the last moment when they're easier to steer, when they're near land-based transmission facilities that steer these storms. And we've recorded this on a data loop that I'm surprised we still have access to. The manipulation is very clear and very inarguable. So we could end up with a Hurricane Otis like that, which decimated Acapulco. Most Americans don't even know this happened. I would encourage people to search online for a flyover of Acapulco after Hurricane Otis hit them. In less than 24 hours, from a mediocre tropical depression to the strongest Cat 5 hurricane ever to hit that part of the world, less than 24 hours. So we don't know what this hurricane is going to do in the Gulf. They could allow it to intensify to a large degree at the last moment. They could knock it down, but there's many objectives being carried out. We can speculate on those objectives and agendas, Polly, but the fact that these storms are being manipulated, inarguable.
But it's actually quite petrifying if you live in Florida, because you don't know what to do. Do you get out? Do you sit and wait it through? I mean, as you say, apparently they can make it bigger or hit you harder. I don't know how they're doing that. I know you've tried to explain to me before, but I'm still trying to get my head around it.
When they can manipulate atmospheric pressure zones, and they can, and they are, and again, technology like ionosphere heaters like HARP in Alaska, that's one. Frequency transmissions are bombarding our atmosphere. They're used as part of these programs. So people should think back to when we had the Olympics in China, and China openly announced that don't worry about the rain, we'll make sure it doesn't. When we think back even further to Project Popeye in Vietnam, they were so effective at controlling the flow of precipitation over Vietnam that by the mid-70s, there were INMOD treaties passed, environmental modification treaties, forbidding weather modification in wartime, but not forbidding a country from weather modifying over its own citizens anytime they want. And nobody pays attention to international treaties anyway. So again, for people to think that these programs don't exist or they can't modify the climate on this scale, they need to do some research.
But if you lived in Florida and it looked like it was coming by you, would you get out?
You know, I'm afraid to volunteer an opinion on that, because again, they can blow this storm up at the last moment and turn it into a Hurricane Otis. And that is done, again, by manipulating atmospheric pressure zones. When you can affect convection over these storms, you control how intense they grow or disperse them. And we know that these storms in the Gulf and the East Coast are being used as a moisture pump to put enough moisture in the air to move up the eastern seaboard to cool down those regions in between the record heat, which we still have here in California, by the way. So again, we see a very erratic weather whack-a-mole scenario, and moisture is needed to chemically nucleate clouds. That's another patented processes of climate engineering. That's why we have such massive hail, Polly, all the time, giant hailstones, and people don't even question, why do we have that now? So there's many agendas and objectives likely being carried out. We cannot know what those are, but the fact that these storms are absolutely, positively being manipulated is beyond debate.
And you wanted to talk about a couple of other storms that we've had before.
We have recorded other storms, again, with data loops at geoengineeringwatch.org. We have a number of these recordings. People can search geoengineeringwatch.org hurricanes and see the inarguable frequency transmission manipulation of these storms. So what this does is the flashes of circular light that you see on that grid pattern on the map of the US are transmission energizing scenarios, and that has a repelling effect on the storm. So they de-energize in front of the direction they want the storm to progress, and they energize on any side that they don't want it to migrate toward. So again, this steering of the storms, this is patented technology, and the data loop that you see here, or you see in that other image, is a data loop that I'm surprised, again, we still have access to. I'm glad we do, but the fact that meteorologists are ignoring this, Polly, is indicative of the fact that they are reading scripts, literally reading scripts. We have Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, two private defense contractors that are neck deep in climate engineering everything. They are passing the script for the scheduled weather down to the meteorologist, National Weather Service, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and that trickles down all the way to the local meteorologists. So they are literally reading scripts passed down by those who are manipulating the climate.
Is that, and you actually did say that this is going to get a lot worse as well. We can expect more of this. Because
the climate is imploding, and whatever a person wants to decide is the causal factor for that. And what I would argue with anybody's perspective on the climate, we can't have any legitimate discussion of climate anything from any perspective without first and foremost addressing climate intervention operations. But the fact that the climate is broken at this point, and climate engineering is further fueling that process. It's not the only causal factor. We've been very, very poor stewards of the planet. It would take hours to even begin to go into that. But the fact that manipulation is occurring on the scale is preventing the planet from responding to that damage on its own, not to mention toxifying our breathable air column every breath we take. This is an assault on many fronts, Polly.
But you hear people in our movement, I mean, a lot of people in our movement are screaming out, climate change is nonsense, it's ridiculous, don't listen to it. But are we saying it is kind of nonsense, but it's not nonsense because it's man-made? They're doing it. They're making climate change.
No, I would not.
Okay, you put me right then. I don't know. I'm confused.
Dichotomous terms. Again, it's not a this or that equation. It's a this and that equation. It's all the above. Any form of human activity that affects the energy balance of the planet is absolutely a part of the problem. So again, we need to think of this in terms of a this and that equation, and focus foremost on the fact that there's an intentional intervention going on here that is interfering with the entire system to a degree that we can't know what the actual equilibrium would be if it were not for this interference in the system, and whether it's being used as a weapon of war. There's no question about that. We see systematic targeting of agricultural regions around the globe, whether it's flash freeze, flash hailstorm, flash drought, a term we hear all the time now because they can drought the atmosphere. So again, what I would encourage, the power structure has tried to drive a wedge into the population, Polly, by getting people to infight about the state of the climate, because we all love to hate Al Gore because of his hypocrisy. The environmental groups won't address the climate engineering issue because they're told that anybody who says anything about geoengineering denies the other forms of damage. And that's a problem. We shouldn't deny that. We've been very bad stewards of the planet. We need to build a bridge here, and we need everybody to agree on the fact that we can't have any legitimate discussion about climate anything from any perspective, again, without first and foremost addressing climate intervention operations.
Dane, you explained it so well. Thank you. Sorry, I'm not up to date on this, but I just love the way you're educating us here at CHD TV. Everyone needs to go to geoengineeringwatch.org to really get up to date on everything. Dane, is there anything else you want to add to this for the people?
We just encourage people to understand that the intentional intervention in the planet's primary life support systems is a recipe for near-term planetary omnicide. And it's again, not just weather warfare, but it is biological warfare because of the toxicological nature of these components. Aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, polymer fibers, graphene, all of these elements toxic in and of themselves. When you combine them, the toxicity increases exponentially. We have peer-reviewed study in the case of mercury and aluminum, both of which we all have in us now. When you combine those two metals, the overall toxicity can increase by as much as 10,000%. That's 100 times worse. So again, this is not even taking into account whatever biological experimentation may be going on here. And we have a historical record of that, Polly. Even as far back as 1977, according to the Washington Post, the U.S. military had conducted no less than 239 open-air biological tests over innocent, unknowing U.S. civilians without their knowledge or consent. So this is an assault we cannot hide from. We need to address it. It's the biggest hole in the bottom of the boat right now in many ways. We have to deal with it. And thank you for you and CHD and your attention to the sky and what's occurring there.
Well, thank you for educating us, Dane Wigington. Okay, geoengineeringwatch.org. Thank you for coming on. So last minute, as always, on to the Good Morning Show. Thank you, Dane.
Thank you.